Hello, good evening, and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to a detailed discussion where me as well as Chethan sir will be taking up the important announcements done by the Finance Minister in today's Union Budget for the financial year 24 and 25. We will not only take up the topics, we will also have a detailed discussion regarding the importance of the announcement. But before we take up the, let's say, the areas, the Finance Minister today has presented her 7th consecutive Union Budget. Which is the other Finance Minister, or which is the Finance Minister who has presented the highest number of budgets for Union Government of India? If you know the answer, please do let us know in the comment section. Now, before I hand over the discussion to Chethan sir, this is my personal view regarding what is the overview of the budget. The budget is inclusive in nature. It has certain provision for everybody. Some are good and some are equally bad, especially if you're an investor in the stock market or if you want to sell your house in the coming days. It has provisions for women. It has provisions for youth of India. It has provision for industries, manufacturing, service sector, MSME, etc. It is overall inclusive budget. Second, it is grounded in reality. By looking at how much is the fiscal space available to the government, they have allocated the spending or the expenditure to various schemes, and they have been able to maintain the fiscal prudence at the same point of time by targeting the fiscal deficit target of 4.9% for current financial year and 4.5% for the next financial year. And I believe that the budget has all the right elements to take us to the path of developed economy by the year 2047. But Chethan sir,
Yes,
according to you, what is the viewpoint of the budget?
I think you summed it up very well, sir. The way I look at it, the budget does have some plus points. There are some minus points as well. For example, as you said, it's a well-balanced budget. It does focus on the right areas, especially with regard to putting India on the right path to become a developed country by 2047. For example, the key areas like next generation technology has been prioritized, be it our green transition with focus on small nuclear modular reactors, or be it the focus on renewable clean energy. I think that puts India on the right path, not just to reduce its emissions and meet our climate change targets, but it does help India to leverage all the critical emerging technologies as well. And second, I think it is a welfare-oriented budget. There are some progressive elements to it. It does focus on various welfare schemes, be it for women, be it for the youth, especially in the employment sector, in skilling. There's a lot of priority given for these areas. And also, it's an inclusive budget. Be it the scheduled tribes and the other weaker sections, there is adequate focus.
Northeast.
Even for the Northeast region, there is adequate focus. But on the downside, the first concern is the opposition has already labeled this as a Bihar Andhra budget. It's not a union budget. Because as you can see, it's very evident that coalition politics is at play. And as we had discussed in a previous session, what will Bihar get? What will Andhra Pradesh get? They didn't get any major cabinet seats.
Yeah.
They were expecting a special category status, which was never met. So now that the budget is out, it's very clear it was a financial reward which had been promised for the coalition partners. So this raises questions on fiscal federalism, because other states are now concerned that they are not getting a fair, equitable share. So I think that would be a downside with regard to the impact on fiscal federalism. And also for taxpayers like us, salary taxpayers, not much of a benefit. The government claims that we might save 17,000 odd rupees, but I don't think it would be that substantial, sir.
Okay. So, let's start with the discussion,
Yes,
sir.
let's get started with the discussion. Sir, one thing which really caught my attention was when Finance Minister began her speech, she spoke about the challenges that are present in the global economy. Because obviously, in a globalized economy, India would also be hit by the global adverse developments. And Nirmala Sitharaman has flagged specific concerns like elevated asset prices and commodity prices. This could be an outcome of the conflicts, the disruption in supply chains, and the overall political uncertainties triggered by the Ukraine war, the Gaza war, and also the chaos in American democracy as well. Plus, the finance ministry has specifically referred to shipping disruptions in the Red Sea and its likely impact on global shipping and commodity prices. So, finance minister has flagged a downward concern, a downward pressure on growth and upward pressure on inflation. So, that is something India should watch out for in the coming fiscal. Sir, I would like to ask you to shed some light on these focus areas, the forecasts that finance minister spoke about.
The government of India in the recent budgets has been laying out certain very important priority areas. And in the interim budget, same argument of forecasts or the four very important, let's say the areas or the specific targets of the government of India were four. Those are: one, Garib, that is basically the poor people. Various reforms have been implemented. Government wants to continue implementing the reforms. And just to add a point here, even the economic survey which has been published yesterday says that the number of poor in case of India have actually come down in the last couple of years. Second very important area of concern, or let's say the focus of the government of India, has been Mahilaye or women. You will see multiple reforms announced by the government in the previous year budgets as well as this year's budget, including the interim budget, mind you, where the focus area has been women. For example, there has been a talk regarding the reduction in the LFPR, women labor force participation rate. There has been a talk regarding more empowerment of the women. In fact, last year, I remember an article, sir, where Government of India has set up a committee to look at the gender budgeting.
Right.
What should be the revamping of the gender budgeting, which is again associated with women empowerment. Third important area is youth or Yuva Shakti. One area where India has to harness the area of a demographic dividend. To harness the demographic dividend, we have to target Yuva Shakti. And in recent times, there has been a lot of discussion regarding whether are we utilizing our youth efficiently. In the sense, are our educated youth, do they have the right skill set?
Right.
Are they getting sufficient number of jobs in the market? And that is exactly what has been done by the government in the present budget, which was announced today. Lot of reforms, lot of measures have been taken to not only ensure we have a skilled youth population, but also to ensure sufficient number of jobs are created. Because essentially we have to ensure that there's a supply as well as the demand in the employment market.
Correct, sir.
And the fourth area is basically our farmers, Annadatas. The government historically, not just only this government but other governments also, they have implemented a lot of reforms to address the issues faced by the farmers. Even in the yesterday's published economic survey, the survey has talked a lot regarding how can we empower the farmers, how can we ensure the farmers are able to earn better, etc. And the same focus has been continued even in the budget. Reforms have been announced in order to promote vegetable production.
Yeah.
Reforms have been announced to ensure processing is done. Reforms have been announced to ensure that we are self-reliant in the context of pulses, oil seeds. And even there is a discussion regarding, or the point or the announcement regarding identifying certain number of farmers and making them promote natural farming.
Right, sir.
So these are the four very important casts, and there is a focus. Sufficient number of announcements have been done in each of these categories.
Right. And what is notable is that, sir, the budget speech of the finance minister talks about the contribution of farmers as well.
Yes.
How farmers are contributing to our food security.
Yes.
It mentions the Antyodaya Anna Yojana, how nearly 80 crore beneficiaries are covered. And accordingly, agriculture sector has got a degree of priority, I believe.
Yeah.
And also, sir, since we are talking about the focus areas, there are four specific themes that the finance minister spoke about. As Shyam sir was discussing, the top focus has been employment and skilling.
Yes.
To ensure that we reap the advantage of our demographic dividend.
When the finance minister started discussing the reforms, the first area of focus that the finance minister discussed was agriculture.
Agriculture, yeah.
Second area of focus of discussion or the announcement was employment and skilling.
I think that shows the priority of the government as well.
Yes.
Then comes MSME sector. We have a lot of initiatives and promotional initiatives which have been announced for MSME industry. And of course, there is some focus on middle class. Right? So let's take a look at this, sir. Let's take a detailed look at all the priority areas.
Yeah. These are the 9 priority areas. what me and Chetan sir will be doing is, one after the other, we'll be discussing each one of them. Let me start the discussion. Let me kick off the discussion with the most important area, which I'm pretty sure most of you are waiting with let's say a lot of intent, is the area of taxation. Multiple reforms have been announced. Some are very good, to a certain extent good for the salaried class. Some are, right, in the sense, are not on the expected lines of the market, which in fact is shown by the market, where many of the shares took a beating because of the announcement.
In fact, both Nifty, Sensex, both are down.
Yes.
And that's an indicator.
And basically that was because of one of the announcements that the government of India has done, that is regarding the capital gains tax, which I'll come to in some time. The first is income tax slabs have been changed. In fact, yesterday I had a discussion regarding the top 10 budget expectations. And in the expectation, as most of the experts were mentioning, the government had to make certain changes regarding income taxes. Reason being, there is a narrative which says that there is lesser demand in the market. There needs to be an impetus provided for more and more goods and services to be purchased by the consumers, by you, by me, and by every one of us.
Basically to boost consumption.
Yes, and the best way to boost the consumption in the market is tweak the income taxes, reduce the income taxes, so that automatically the amount of expendable income increases, and that will contribute to the demand in the market. So in that regards, the government of India has made certain changes for the income tax slab. Earlier, please understand, there are two income tax slabs. One old tax regime and the other one is new tax regime. Earlier, that is before the announcement, for 0 to 3 lakh, the tax rate was 0. 3 to 6 lakh, it was 5. 6 to 9 lakh, it was 10. 9 to 12 lakh, it was basically 20, and so on and so forth. What the government of India has done is, they have changed the tax rates now. They have basically changed the slabs which is applicable on these numbers. For example, earlier it was 3 to 6 lakh rupees, it has been changed to 3 to 7 lakh rupees. From 6 to 9, it has been made 7 to 10 lakh rupees, so on and so forth. In essence, by changing the income tax slabs, and if you ask me, sir, should we remember all of these slabs? I would simply say for a civil servant or an aspirant, all of this is not required. All you need to understand.
But if the aspirant is working, is a salaried professional,
and
they would be concerned about this number.
This one, as well as the standard deduction, definitely yes. If you are a salaried person, definitely yes. All you need to understand is, the slabs have been tweaked in such a way that instead of 3 to 6, now it is 3 to 7, which will basically ensure that you will be able to pay lesser amount of a tax overall when the income taxes are calculated. The finance minister says that with this kind of a tweaking in the income tax structure, a taxpayer will be able to save somewhere in the range of 17,500 rupees. 17,500 rupees. So essentially it means the buyer, or let's say the income taxpayer, now will have more of money to spend in the market. That's the first very important change. Second very important change, which was expected by the government, is an angel tax.
Angel tax.
Essentially, the concept of angel tax was announced back in the year 2012, finance bill. Pranab Mukherjee was the finance minister at that point of time. The whole idea of introducing angel tax was, the government was worried that there was a money laundering. Lot of black money was getting circulated into the startups, invested into the equity of startups. To address that issue, government announced angel tax. But the concern was, it was implemented post 2016 in India. Lot of these startups raised a concern regarding its calculation. The amendments were introduced by the government to amend angel tax, the impact of angel tax. But even then, many of the taxpayers were concerned, especially the startups. It was in fact considered to be very draconian. In many of the cases, startups complained that the amount of tax demand which has been raised is more than the funding they have received. And the amount was raised, or it was so high, because of penalties, interest, as well as the tax notice.
Yeah.
So finally, before the budget was announced, in fact, the DPIIT, one of the departments of the government, basically batted in favor of scrapping of the angel tax. And the finance minister today has announced a scrapping of angel tax. Now,
so just to interrupt you, the abolition of angel tax, will it again bring back the concern of money laundering?
There are multiple ways through which, because please understand, this was announced back in the year 2012.
Right.
And the current situation is that there is a startup funding winter. The startups are starved. They're basically not able to find sufficient finances post the pandemic recovery.
Right. So this will make startup founders very happy?
Yes, this will definitely would have made the startups very, very happy, because this has been a long-standing demand.
Yeah.
That is the reason. So one is angel tax. Now, in fact, in case of angel tax, please remember the section number that can be asked in the civil services. It was introduced under section 56 of IT Act of 1961. IT Act of 1961. Third very important announcement, which most of you or the salaried people will be happy, standard deduction has been increased. The standard deduction, which was 50,000 rupees, has been increased to 75,000 rupees. In fact, it was expected to be increased to 1 lakh, which essentially means now the taxable income will go down by 25,000 rupees.
Right.
People will have more money because they will pay lesser amount of tax to government. In fact, the beauty of standard tax is that you do not have to pay any kind of a proof of investment to claim this particular deduction.
Right.
Otherwise, any deduction that you want to claim,
you have to submit
will have
proof.
to submit lot of documentation.
Yeah, which becomes a lot of paperwork.
Yes.
So, sir, are you happy with the tax reduction as a salaried employee?
I would have expected much more. In fact, in case of income taxes, in fact, most of the experts expected much more would be provided to a middle class person, not to poor people, middle class person. Because hardly around 2 crore people actually pay income taxes in India. So middle class people expected a lot in terms of income tax changes. Even in standard deduction, like I said, we expected it to go up to 1 lakh rupees. Next one, capital gains tax modified. This is a very interesting concept. In case of India, capital gains tax, since introduction, has been changed and chopped so many times. There have been a lot of complications regarding the capital gains. For example, if you have a listed share, capital gains tax in that case will be imposed on 12-month basis.
Right.
If you have unlisted share, 24 months. If you have invested in a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, it will be implemented based on 36-month period, either more than 36 months long term, less than 36 short term. So the concept of capital gains tax was very complicated.
Right.
Market expected lot of changes to be done in case of capital gains. What government of India has done, and that's the reason market is unhappy. It has increased the capital gains tax. Rather than providing relief, it has increased the capital gains. For short-term capital gains, it has increased from 15 to 20%. For long-term capital gains, it has increased from 10 to 12.5%.
12.5%.
Now, many of the people will basically say, okay, capital gains tax, this is a problem. Then is it the only reason why the market has behaved this way? You have a derivative market, futures and options. In the futures and options also, the security transaction tax has been increased by the government.
That could also be because, sir, of late, a lot of youth have gotten into F&O trading, even though they don't understand what futures are.
Yes, that could be one of the reasons, because Reserve Bank of India has raised a concern regarding this. SEBI has raised a concern regarding this. Reason is, no doubt if you make money in the derivative market, you will make a huge amount of money. But it is just a minute number of people. Most people end up losing money in the F&O because they speculate.
Exactly. Highly
speculative. So the government wants to reduce the amount of speculation that takes place in the F&O market. And that is one of the reasons why the market is not behaving favorably to this concept of a change in the capital gains. In fact, there is one more reason as well. The government earlier had a concept of indexation if you sell a fixed asset. Now this indexation for a land has been removed, which essentially means earlier if I sold my land after owning for, let's say, 10 years, I could adjust the price for inflation. That would reduce the price, that will reduce the capital gains and the amount of taxes I pay. Now government has removed indexation benefit, and that will mean that I will not be getting indexation. My capital gains would be higher, so the taxes payment would also be higher.
Right.
That is also one of the reasons why market is not behaving as per the expectation.
So this again increases the tax burden on investors,
tax burden has increased.
Property owners.
That's the reason many of the investors are saying these kind of reforms are the announcements by the government in case of the financial market, might basically deal a death knell to the financial market. Next, Income Tax Act of 1961 will be reviewed now. It was expected. The earlier government, when we had UPA government, they had proposed a direct taxes code.
Yeah.
They wanted to change the whole structure of direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. They proposed GST, we implemented that.
Yeah.
The direct taxes code was actually shelved by the current government. Now they are basically saying, we want to review the IT Act of 1961 so that it will be simplified. It will be made much more comprehensive. People can understand it and the disputes can also come down. Next, income tax on foreign companies will be reduced to 35. Many of the learners will be having a doubt regarding this because they will simply say, sir, somewhere I heard, and in fact, they will point out to me and say, you only told income tax on the corporates is 22% in India or 25% including cesses and surcharges. But this announcement is slightly different. If you are a company which has a subsidiary in India, you are registered with the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, then you will be taken as a permanent establishment in India. You will have the option to pay corporate taxes at 25%, including cesses and surcharges. But imagine, I'm a foreign company. I have only one project to implement in India. I will not set up a subsidiary in India. I will set up a branch office in India.
Right.
And this branch office will generate certain amount of income. That income will be taxed at 35% instead of 40%.
Right.
The argument which has been given by various experts is this will help us to attract foreign investments away from China.
Okay.
Right. Next one, Vivad Se Vishwas. This has been announced. Earlier also, Vivad Se Vishwas has been announced round 1, round 2. This is a Vivad Se Vishwas 2024 to reduce the taxation disputes. And finally, your parents will be happy, your mother will be happy, let's say, you will also be happy with this. The government has reduced the customs duty on the gold as well as silver.
Silver as well.
Until now, it was 15%. And please remember that 15% is broken down into two components. Basic customs duty of 10% and 5% agriculture infrastructure development cess. The government would reduce that 10% to 6% now. Basic customs duty has been reduced to 6, which effectively means now the gold prices are expected to come down, assuming nothing else changes, and you will be able to purchase the gold at lower prices.
So no wonder the share prices of all the jewelers has shot
the
up.
companies such as Kalyan Jewelers, etc.
Titan,
They basically went up after this announcement.
Yeah.
Done? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So next, we'll look at the next priority area, which is inclusive human resource development and social justice. Now, in this segment, there were some very interesting announcements, but it was widely expected as well. When a coalition government was formed, sir, we were all expecting that Nitish Kumar would have certain demands, Chandrababu Naidu would have certain demands, because this NDA government was entirely dependent on the coalition partners. Their primary demand was for special category status. But categorically, the Modi government had refused to grant special category status. So it was very interesting for us to watch as to what would be the reward for these coalition partners, and now it has become very evident in the budget. The government has announced a new initiative focused on Eastern India, the Purvodaya initiative. In fact, that is a clever way of hiding the electoral dividend which is being paid to the coalition partners.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's a great political move as well, because along with rewarding Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, in a way it extends to Odisha, West Bengal and Jharkhand, which are key electoral focus areas for the BJP.
Yeah.
In a way, BJP has been desperate to make inroads in West Bengal. So a scheme like
It
this
has already made inroads into Odisha.
in
now.
Odisha, exactly, it's a way of rewarding the voters as well. And maybe it sends signal to other states like Tamil Nadu, which has not voted for, let's say, BJP, that you vote for us, you get rewarded eventually. So that way, electorally, politically, I think it's a great move, right? But obviously, any budget is driven by political electoral calculations. So Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, they have quite literally got a bonanza in this budget. Some very important infrastructure schemes have been announced. For example, if you look at the dedicated freight corridor, the Eastern dedicated freight corridor, which links Amritsar to Kolkata, a new industrial node at Gaya has been proposed, which will become a major industrial cluster. And this also has a cultural dimension, because under the tourism initiatives, a lot of cultural oriented initiatives have been proposed to revive the temples and the pilgrimage sites, which could revive the tourism as well, thus boost the economy of Bihar. So along with improved connectivity, improved industrial activity, it will also drive more tourism as well. Next, with regard to road connectivity, some mega expressway projects have been announced, and under the tourism initiative, places like Bodh Gaya, Rajgir, Vaishali, which are very significant in Hinduism, in Buddhism, even for Jains. Rajgir is very significant in all the three faiths. So the revival of the tourist infrastructure has been proposed, and this is going to be very beneficial for Bihar. Along with that, some new bridges over the Ganga river, power projects which will solve the electricity problem, the deficit which the region experiences, along with new airports and several other infrastructure projects. So Bihar has clearly got its share of the pie. And if you look at the disaster management initiatives announced, there is specific focus on flood assistance to Bihar. Because especially, sir, you might know the Kosi River, it's called the sorrow of Bihar. Frequently floods and causes enormous destruction. So under the AIBP program, the Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Program, interlinking of river project, the Kosi-Mechi link, has been approved, and separate flood assistance is being provided to Bihar to contain and mitigate the disaster-related consequences. But to be fair to the government, flood assistance has been given to other disaster-prone states as well, like Assam, Uttarakhand, then Sikkim, Himachal Pradesh. So all of them are receiving flood mitigation funds, which is indeed a very big step, given that we are experiencing more extreme weather events, which is primarily driven by climate change. So I think these are some very noteworthy initiatives. And what really caught my attention was the initiatives related to tourism in the same eastern region of India. Most of them are focused on few Hindu pilgrimage sites, Buddhist pilgrimage sites. There is a project to revive the Nalanda, which is a long standing project. And this has foreign policy dimensions as well. Because under India's foreign policy, we have the Buddhist Circuit Initiative, where we promote our Buddhist heritage and try to attract tourists from other Asian countries where Buddhism is a popular religion, like from Japan to South Korea to Sri Lanka to China, and improved infrastructure at these temple complexes, and especially Rajgir. This will definitely drive up tourism, both domestic and international tourism, fetching a lot of revenue for Bihar. And Odisha is also a beneficiary on the cultural and tourism front. Then coming to Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh has also...
So before you go to Andhra Pradesh.
Yes, sir.
Do you think Government of India is doing sufficient to boost tourism in India? Because that is one area where we can save a lot of outflow of forex reserve.
Yes.
And not only that, attract a lot of inflow of, let's say, dollars.
Forex as well, yeah.
I'm an economist, so I'll talk in terms of dollars.
Right.
So, do you think Government of India has been doing sufficient or has done sufficient in the current budget?
In the current budget, definitely the focus on tourism is very evident. And also, sir, in the last 10 years, if you look at the Modi government, there has been a lot of focus on promoting tourism. Be it attracting foreign tourists or even boosting domestic tourism. PM Modi himself has personally led the initiative, from visiting Lakshadweep to setting up all the temple corridors. So there is a lot of focus on that. And we are working with Nepal, Sri Lanka as well to revive the pilgrimage routes, the Ramayana route, for example, and we have invested in certain projects abroad as well to interlink our pilgrimage routes. So there has been sufficient focus, and I think that you can see that in this year's budget as well. Yeah. And coming to Andhra Pradesh. So one big demand of the TDP, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, was to ensure that the commitments made under the Reorganization Act is fulfilled. Because ever since Andhra Pradesh was bifurcated, Andhra Pradesh has been at the receiving end. It has lost out on the revenue, it has lost out on its administrative capabilities as well. So Chandrababu Naidu was demanding for special category status, but that has been refused, as we discussed. But the Modi government has made up for this by announcing 15,000 crores for Amravati. Now this was a dream project for Chandrababu Naidu. So this is a big fulfillment of the demand of the TDP. Then the Polavaram irrigation project, again a major political issue for both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It helps in pleasing the vote base of the TDP as well. And also it's very crucial with regard to agriculture in this belt.
In fact, I remember Finance Minister specifically saying, pointing out Polavaram and saying, this will help us achieve food security.
Food security, exactly. So that way it's a project focused on national interests as well, plus the political interests of the parties. Next, with regard to industrial development, there were some interesting announcements. There are some major corridors coming up, sir, like Hyderabad-Bengaluru corridor, Visakhapatnam-Chennai corridor. On these industrial corridors, new nodes are being set up in Andhra Pradesh. Oravkal node, Koparti node. So this will lead to large-scale industrial development. It can boost manufacturing. And also, let's not forget, Andhra Pradesh is a coastal state.
Yeah.
It can always leverage the ports. There is attention on port development as well. This can boost exports. So this can be great news for Andhra Pradesh. Plus, several regions of Andhra Pradesh have been recognized as backward regions, be it the Rayalaseema belt, the North Andhra coastal belt, Prakasam district.
Yeah.
They've all received special funds in order to ensure that the backwardness is addressed in these areas. So overall, it's a great budget for Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. Then, since we are talking about social justice, one issue is tribal development, tribal welfare.
Before you go to tribal development,
Yes,
I just want to ask you a question on behalf of the students. So don't you think this kind of, let's say, the budget allocation that is done by the government, don't you think it will solidify the argument of many of the other southern states that the central government has a stepmotherly treatment towards them?
Right. Absolutely, sir. That concern has always been there. That's why I think I told at the start as well that such prioritized allocation for few states on political grounds will definitely raise concerns for fiscal federalism. Many states already have a concern that they're not getting a fair share. But again, to be fair to the government as well, just as a counterpoint, if you look at the net devolution which has happened from the union taxes which has been collected to the states, even though Bihar and UP are right at the top, Andhra Pradesh has not really got such a high share. Its share has been comparable with Karnataka and others.
Yeah.
So, and again, we should keep in mind the political considerations. Governments will be driven by it. That's the reality. So, in that regard, I think it's still fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, and coming to tribal welfare, the Pradhan Mantri Janjatiya Unnat Gram Abhiyan, the Modi government has been prioritizing tribal welfare over the last few years. In fact, PM Modi personally launched the Janjatiya Divas celebration as well. So there is great focus on the tribal villages, the aspirational districts, and also this is like hitting two birds with one stone. This will help in tribal development, sir. At the same time, these areas are Naxal infested areas where they exploit the tribal issues and they try to build a narrative against the state. They build their propaganda. So this will help in countering Naxal propaganda to counter left-wing extremism. Then coming to women. Women are a priority focus area in this year's budget. As you mentioned, sir, along with the poor, the youth, and the farmers, women have been recognized as one of the important castes. And special schemes have been launched to ensure the welfare of women and the girl child, amounting to 3 lakh crore rupees. And more importantly, I would like to point out the focus on women employment. Because this has been a concern, sir. I think you will know better. Female labor force participation rate has been relatively lower. I think economic survey says that
it around 37%. And globally it is around 54%.
54%. So there is a considerable gap. So to boost the employment of women, to create more opportunities for women, a lot of initiatives have been launched. The government is trying to work with the private sector to create creche facilities for working mothers and also to create women hostels to ensure women's safety and encourage more women to go out and work. So I think these are great initiatives focused on women empowerment. And as you pointed out, sir, for Northeast region, financial inclusion is a priority area. And I think apart from India Post, there is no other bank or institution which can really have that kind of reach, that last mile connectivity. So India Post will be opening 100 branches in the Northeast. So this is a very big development as far as financial inclusion is concerned in the Northeast. Imagine the number of accounts, bank accounts that will be opened, the economic benefits that will arise out of that. Plus,
just to add to your point, the banks are a very important source of capital formation. Very recently, if you have followed the news cycle, Reserve Bank of India's governor raised a concern regarding slow mobilization rate. That is the deposit mobilization rate. The banks are giving more loans. The growth rate in the loans is greater than the deposit collection rate. This again, not the primary objective, but to a certain extent, it will help us in mobilization of the deposits. And that will also add to capital formation. If you are saving sufficient amount of money, the investments can be done in the same region, demand can be promoted, etc., etc. So that is the importance of this kind of announcement of the government.
So this can be channeled into investments as well. So this was about
you were
social
discussing
justice.
A couple of more. The previous one.
It was the same points.
This one.
It's related to same Andhra Pradesh. The same points. It's already covered.
Okay, let me take up the industry as well as MSME announcements. Lot of announcements. but not all of them are relevant for civil services. First one, the MSME sector. Finance Minister has categorically identified the importance of MSMEs. She says MSMEs are very much part and parcel of and the backbone of Indian economy. They contribute in terms of GDP, employment generation. They contribute in terms of, let's say, exports, etc. And in the recent times, especially post-pandemic, during as well as the post-pandemic, despite so many reforms being implemented by the government, even today, MSMEs face a lot of issues. Especially, let's say, when there's a stress, when they do not have sufficient payment, when they do not have sufficient sales to be done either in the domestic market or in the global market, lot of stress is created. In order to address those issue points, or let's say the pain points, first announcement done by the government is, there is an initiative of the government or the scheme of the government, Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, Micro Units Development and Refinancing Agency. Under that, there are three categories of loans which are provided: Shishu, Kishore and Tarun. The highest value of the loan is Tarun category, maximum was 10 lakh rupees. Now government says, if you are making the payment promptly, that's a key term. If you are making the payment promptly, if you are repaying the loans correctly, I will double the limit to you. Now you can borrow up to 20 lakh rupees.
So it's a good time to borrow and start a medium enterprise.
So basically the MSMEs will be happy with this. Reason being, the beauty of the Mudra Yojana is you will get the loan without providing any collateral. Without providing any security, you'll be able to get the loan. And the Tarun category has been increased to doubled to 20 lakh rupees. Second, there is a platform called as a TREDS platform set up by the Reserve Bank of India. Lot of times what happens, sir, if I'm a micro enterprise, if I've sold something to, let's say, a company, if the company promises to pay, let's say, in 45 days, within 15 days, I would require money. In that case, I cannot approach the company and ask the money to be paid because they have agreed to pay at 45 days. In such cases, there is a platform which has been set up by Reserve Bank of India. I can, be a part of, I can be registered on the TREDS. The buyer will be registered on the TREDS. I will sell my bills receivable to a financier. I will be able to get the finances. That is a TREDS platform. Until now, the company's turnover, if it was 500 crore, they were supposed to be on the TREDS platform. Finance Minister has cut it into half, 250 crore. All of these will have to be present on the TREDS. In fact, the central public sector enterprises, more than 20 CPSEs now will have to be listed in the TREDS platform, which essentially means lot of MSMEs again will be benefited by this. Third, 50 food irradiation units in the MSME. Financial assistance will be provided. Food irradiation basically means using radiation to kill the germs, to kill the microorganisms which can cause, let's say, diseases when we consume them. So 50 food irradiation.
Or it can even reduce the shelf life of perishable products.
Even the organisms which are present, they will reduce the shelf life, which is basically, which will make sure that the food will spoil very fast.
Correct, sir. So now, this will improve the logistics on the back end of the supply chain.
It will definitely add to the shelf life. We can transport it in a much better way, store it in a better way. So 50 irradiation units in MSMEs will be set up. Government will provide the financing assistance for this. Credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs in manufacturing sector. Essentially, it means if I want to take a loan, many of the times the banks are afraid of giving a loan to me. Reason being, I may not have sufficient asset to back up, sell and basically repay the
loans.
For such type of MSMEs, government says, don't worry, there will be a credit guarantee scheme. This will ensure that you will be able to get more access to credit now. This will be promoting access to credit for the MSMEs. Next, whenever the MSMEs are under stress, for example, in recent times, if there is, let's say, if there is some issue in the European market, let's say inflation, MSMEs in India would be concerned. Reason being, we export a lot of goods and services to
these markets,
the USA market, European market, etc. So when there is a stress in the MSME, where should they go? They should have.
For example, when the Red Sea crisis began,
yes,
MSME sector was worried because
that is one of the very important routes which are taken to export from the MSMEs to rest of the world.
Correct.
So when they are in the stress period, the government now says government will provide the funding and there will be a support mechanism that would be provided. And lastly, integrated technology platform for insolvency and bankruptcy code. Again and again, even when I've discussed the Hindu news analysis, or even when sir has discussed the analysis part, we would have discussed one area, that is insolvency and bankruptcy code. It has been implemented for more than 7 years now. But even today, there are certain problems or the cracks in the insolvency and bankruptcy system. Government says, one, we will set up a technology platform to ensure all the stakeholders are brought on to the same platform. Second, the government also says there are certain issues under the IBC. The cases which have been resolved so far, we have been able to clear more than 1 lakh crore worth of the credit which was stuck up in the system. But even after that, the number of days which are taken for resolution is much, much higher.
Right.
According to the law, we are supposed to finish it in within 330 days. In many of the cases, it takes more than 2 years, more than 3 years. Even the recovery is not very great. Recovery is somewhere around 30%, but again, I will take that number with a pinch of salt. 30% compared to other systems is much, much better.
Right.
Right. So there are certain issues. Government says we will address these issues. We will have a review of the insolvency and bankruptcy code.
So, sir, will this benefit any employers with regard to standing insolvency proceedings?
Sir, in case of, let's say, IBC, there is a technical term called as priority waterfall. Essentially, it means once the company is, let's say, either liquidated or sold to somebody else, once the money is recovered, who will get the first part of the pie? Employees are much lower, government will be at the top.
The government itself.
So government will take away whatever their charges are outstanding, and after that, slowly and steadily, the creditors and then employees, then everybody else will come.
Right, sir. So the next priority area is energy security. Sir, I personally felt the announcements made in energy sector is honestly outstanding. It is really far-sighted. It is really putting India on the right path with regard to being a developed country by 2047.
And I have a doubt regarding this then. You say these announcements were very good. But don't you think on one side, Government of India says, we want to become net zero by 2070?
Correct, sir.
We want to have net zero emissions in railways by 2030. But at the same point of time, government is also promoting thermal energy.
Right, sir. That's a very good point. If you see here, the government has announced the promotion of these ultra super thermal power plants, right? So the point you're making is, at the same time, the government is focusing on thermal power projects which consume coal, which contribute to fossil fuel emissions. But sir, I have a counterpoint. If you look at the overall budget and if you look at the energy security plans of India, there is an increasing allocation for the nuclear sector. Right, not just in the nuclear civilian domain, not just the large nuclear reactors, but there is a special priority given to small and modular nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
So a special scheme is being launched to promote more research and development with regard to the Bharat small nuclear reactors. And the best part is the private sector is being roped in a very big way into the nuclear domain, which is a clean energy.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way that balances it out. And also, please understand that these thermal power plants, right, they're much more efficient than a traditional thermal power plant. According to data, sir, these thermal power plants have a greater efficiency, up to almost 46%, which means the emissions are lower and it can reduce the import of coal as well. And of course, India is balancing it out. We have never said that we will phase out coal. We are phasing it down. We will reduce it. So if we achieve net zero by, let's say, 2070, even then, we will continue relying on fossil fuels because India has every right to do that. We still have the carbon space left in the carbon budget. Because developed countries, they have largely consumed the carbon budget. They have historical responsibilities on them. So as a developing nation and with a country with one of the lowest per capita emissions, we still have every right to continue burning fossil fuels to ensure we meet our developmental targets. So I think it's a very balanced budget in that regard, where we are focusing on clean energy, be it solar, wind, nuclear energy, small nuclear reactors, etc. At the same time, we are focusing on more efficient forms of thermal power.
Yeah.
We are trying to bring down the emissions, but our dependency on coal, fossil fuels will continue.
In fact, I'll just add a point regarding whatever you've said, which you told me when we were basically having a discussion.
Right, sir.
You basically told me that in case of renewable energy, there is a problem of not being able to generate throughout the day.
Correct.
Right?
It is intermittent.
Yeah. So that's a reason, no doubt, government will keep on promoting renewable energy. But even after that, until unless we have, let's say, storage solutions
Correct,
to
sir.
the extent of meeting the demand, especially during daytime or even during the night time, our dependence on the fossil fuels will continue.
Yeah. And sir, I think that is where pumped storage policy comes into picture. In that way, government has addressed this issue as well. As you rightly pointed out, solar, wind, etc., these clean renewable forms of energy, they are not very consistent. During cloud cover or during adverse weather conditions or during night time, you can't really rely
Especially
on
right now.
Right now,
when there is monsoon.
Exactly. So it's not very reliable. So I think this is where storage of the electricity generated through clean forms becomes very critical, and that is where battery technology comes into picture. So the government is coming out with a pumped storage policy to ensure that we have enough options to store that clean electricity and use it at a later point, ensure that there is consistent supply.
Okay.
And to achieve self-sufficiency with regard to batteries, and sir, I'm sure you know that critical minerals, strategic minerals are absolutely vital, be it lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, and all the rare earth elements as well. So in that regard, there is a big announcement. With regard to taxation, Finance Minister announced that there is an exemption for 25 critical minerals, and custom duties for other critical minerals also is being brought down. So this will make it easier for India to secure those resources from abroad. And more importantly, the Finance Minister has announced a critical minerals mission. This will really help India to ensure that we secure these critical resources. Because in various industries, sir, electronics, defense, aerospace, and consumer industries, these minerals are absolutely critical. And India, unfortunately, has a very limited resource in that regard. So through this mission, the government is focusing on all the three priority areas, which is to increase domestic production. Recently in Jammu and Kashmir, we have found a major lithium reserve. We would like to tap into those reserves and any other small reserves we have discovered. At the same time, there is priority being given for recycling of critical minerals. This will create a circular economy. It will ensure the economy becomes more efficient if we can recycle the critical minerals. And more importantly, overseas acquisition. We have even set up a public sector entity called Kabil to secure foreign mines from African countries to Australia to the lithium triangle countries in South America. So in that regard, I think it's a great initiative. Plus, offshore mining mineral policy also has been announced.
But sir, let me put you in a in a spot now.
Yes, sir.
And I'm pretty sure most of the viewers will also criticize me for that.
Right.
One of the very important countries in terms of, let's say, mining critical minerals is China.
Right.
So in that particular regards, which I know I'll be criticized now, in that particular regards, don't you think it is in India's interest to have a very good relations with China? Because I distinctly remember last year, China announced that because there is scarce availability, lesser availability of critical minerals in the domestic market, they imposed a restriction on export of some of them.
Right.
And in fact, one of the experts argued that it is like if China catches cold, then India will start sneezing now.
Right.
And so in that particular context, do you think it is better for India to have very good friendly relations with China so that the import of minerals will continue?
Right. Sir, one would wish to have good relations with all their neighbors. India has always been a peace-loving country. We would seek out friendly relations. But the ground reality is that China is an inherently aggressive power. China is inherently an expansionist power. So in that regard, it wouldn't be right for India to secure friendly ties with China just for the sake of sourcing critical minerals. Because there are other alternatives. For example, we have become part of the Mineral Security Partnership led by the United States. And Australia is a very reliable partner. It has major resources of critical minerals. There are African countries which can supply India with critical minerals, and Latin American countries as well. So there are alternative supply chains available for us. And given the standing border dispute and in general China's aggression, and also sir, China knows how to leverage its economic advantage for geopolitical gains. In fact, UPSC had asked a mains question on this. How does China leverage its economic advantage and turn that into a geopolitical strategic advantage? So it would never be advisable to be reliant on Chinese supplies. In fact, not just India, most countries, even US, European countries, they're already struggling because of their China dependency. There is an import dependency. So everyone is trying to become a little self-reliant, create alternate supply chains. So I think India is on the right path in that regard.
Okay.
Then coming back to energy sector, sir, there were a few other announcements, minor announcements. There was a initiative with regard to the hard to abate sectors. These are sectors where it is very hard to reduce the emissions. Like for example, steel sector. No matter what you do, no matter what technological changes you do, it's very hard to bring down the emissions. And we have to continue the steel production. So here, carbon market is being created with specific emission targets. So that at least the overall emissions from that industry, from specific hard to abate industries can be brought down. And the government is incentivizing this. So I think,
in fact, these kind of announcements will become very important if you look at, let's say, the European countries, which are trying to impose tariffs on the emissions of these industries.
The carbon border adjustment mechanism, which India is opposing, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. And also, with regard to MSME sector, the government is proposing an energy audit to drive energy efficiency in the MSME industry as well. Because, sir, as you told, MSME industry is absolutely critical for our exports, for our GDP, for employment generation, because it is a labor-intensive sector. So making it energy efficient is also a priority. Plus, under the Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, which was announced during the interim budget, there have been 1.28 crore registrations, which I think is quite phenomenal.
In fact, the target was 1 crore.
1 crore. And the government says, at least as the government claims to have overshot the target. And so this is great for adoption of solar energy. To install rooftop solar panels and integrate that with the power grids. So that's about energy security. I think now we can talk about employment.
Employment as well as skilling. One of the very important focus areas of the union government budget this year. Lot of announcements. Let's look at some of them. First one is, there is an initiative which has been taken by the government by the name of Employment Linked Incentive, just on lines of PLI, where the government has given certain targets or parameters. If you meet them, government will provide incentives.
Sir, if I'm not wrong, you actually predicted this yesterday in the expectation.
Yes. In the budget expectation video that we uploaded yesterday, one very important focus area that I felt government should implement reforms was the jobs. And the reason was very simple, sir. If you have seen, forget about other newspapers, if you look at only Hindu newspaper in the last, let's say, 1 month, there have been umpteen times where there is a discussion regarding employment as well as unemployment.
Right.
Just to quote certain examples, couple of days ago, there was one article regarding female unemployment rate as an editorial. Before that, there was, in the beginning of the month itself, this month of July, there was one more article regarding overall unemployment situation in India, how Make in India can, or manufacturing in India can address it. There was a report by the Citigroup which talked about the issue of unemployment in India. There was another report by Reserve Bank of India, KLEMS report, which countered the argument of unemployment and said, we have created sufficient number of jobs. So it was just a matter of time when government of India would start making certain announcements. And again, this is nothing new. If you look at what has happened to let's say the elections, Lok Sabha election results, this was very much predictable. So government has announced an initiative, ELI, Employment Linked Incentive, under which there are 3 schemes, Scheme A, B and C. In the Scheme A, 1 month wage, if you are a salaried person of up to 1 lakh rupees, 1 month wage in 3 installments up to 15,000 rupees. Up to 15,000. Do not misunderstand it to say that 1 lakh rupee will be given. Up to 15,000 rupees, that too in 3 installment would be given to you. This is expected to benefit 210 lakh youth in India. Second one is a Scheme B, job creation in manufacturing sector. This is provided to first time employees, that is the people who will get the job for the first time. And here, whatever is your EPFO contribution, once you become an employee, you will have to contribute, right, to an organization called as EPFO. That is compulsory. So EPFO contribution, the incentive to both employee as well as employer for EPFO contribution would be provided for the first 4 years. For the first 4 years. And this is expected to benefit around 30 lakh youth in India. And the third scheme, that is a Scheme C, this will basically provide EPFO contribution reimbursements to employees, and that will be limited to 3,000 rupees per month for 2-year duration. So these are basically the 3 schemes which are expected to be implemented under Employment Linked Incentive.
So do you think, is it the right way to create employment by incentivizing the employer? Or shouldn't the government focus on genuinely creating job opportunities?
Sir, the issue in case of India has been that earlier also government of India has implemented multiple schemes. But the problem has been that because of multiple, let's say, situations such as external parameters, internal factors, that has led to a lot of loss of the jobs. And again, I will not blame it only on the external and internal factors. Even to a certain extent, some of the laws of Government of India has incentivized the companies to hire lesser number of people.
Okay.
The stringent labor laws. Right, where there are more than 100 labor laws put together, the central as well as the state government. Even for that matter, if you take the current discussion that is happening surrounding, let's say, Karnataka, if you look at the provisions of the Karnataka gig employee law, it is not in favor of some of the stakeholders. After that also, there was one more proposal that was put forward by Karnataka government regarding one more law where they wanted to employ for 14 hours a day.
14 hours a day, yeah.
Which has been correctly criticized by everybody in the market. So argument is there are certain issues as a result of which there has been a problem in terms of demand side, that is generation of jobs. So government has not only taken a measure to create jobs in the market, it also is ensuring that sufficient skilling would be provided. Couple of more schemes are there regarding skilling itself. So these are the 3 schemes. What about the other initiatives? The other initiatives are 20 lakh youth will be skilled for a period of more than 5-year duration. And the beauty of the initiatives that the government is taking now, unlike earlier system, where I would simply train a youth and expect the youth to get a job in the market.
Right.
And the problem, central problem of that initiative was the industries wanted a different skill set, the youth would be having a different skill set.
In fact, sir, I would like to add something here, very interesting anecdote. Recently, there was this alumni meet in my former college. I was talking to the dean, the principal, and they were pointing out this gap.
Yeah.
The gap in the skills,
Yes.
what industry leaders expect, and what the graduates actually have. There is a huge gap in the required skills.
Yes.
So, do you think this will be addressed?
Very, very pertinent question. In fact, if you look at the initiative by the name of Pradhan Mantri Vikas Yojana, Kaushal Vikas Yojana, the third iteration, PMKVY 3.0, which was launched very, very recently by the government, post-pandemic, they decided that rather than skilling a person and expecting the person to get a job, first, I will conduct a survey district-wise.
Right.
Every district, we set up a skill council. They would survey the district, find out what kind of skill sets are needed, and then provide that in the form of training, which essentially means the demand of the industry as well as the skill sets which are there with the youth are one and the same. And that would automatically ensure that the youth who are skilled would be getting the job. In fact, here also, if you look at the last announcement in the slide, the finance minister clearly stated that the course content as well as the design will be aligned as per the skill requirements of the industries. We will first assess what is the requirement. Then we will provide the skilling.
Sir, here I would like to widen this argument. When government says skilling, vocational training, usually I'm assuming it is always something related to, let's say, plumbing skills, carpentry skills, some handicraft skills.
Yes.
This always creates employment which is of a lower value.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the government really focus on education more? Instead of spending so much money just on skilling, why not focus more on education? Ensure that you have a stronger education system, meet the goals of NEP, ensure you get more well-trained youth who don't require skilling in the first place. Ensure they get high-paying jobs and more skilled jobs instead of the low-skilled jobs the government is pushing for.
In fact, that was one of the important areas of new education policy, the training, vocational training. But to what extent that has to be implemented, what changes that we need to implement in our own education system, that will take certain time. But so far, the government has changed its policy. Rather than basically having a supply-driven model for a labor, they have shifted to a concept of a demand-driven labor model. And this, in fact, was asked in UPSC. It is better to have a demand-driven labor model rather than having a supply-driven labor model.
Exactly, yeah.
And not just this. In fact, Government of India has announced one more initiative, that is a Scheme 5 in the Prime Minister's program. The first 3, this is the 4th and the 5th one, where the Finance Minister says, we will ensure that in the next 5 years, 1 crore people will be working as apprentices in top 500 companies in India. The argument of the government is, if you work as an apprentice for 1 year as a trainee in these large companies, you will know what kind of skill sets they are expecting. And in the process, they will also provide training to you. Now, many of the companies would simply say, sir, where do we have the money to provide the skilling? The finance minister says, you have a corporate social responsibility fund. Out of the CSR, use the funds to provide the training to the people. And regarding stipend, I will take care of it. One-time assistance of 6,000 rupees, I will pay for it. But the training expenditure has to be taken up by the respective companies out of their CSR funds.
Right.
And this also is a very important initiative. Reason being, we have completed 10 years of CSR implementation now. Right? The CSR was actually implemented back in the year 2013 with the New Companies Act, where in 2024, 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And that's a precise reason a question was asked on CSR in the preliminary examination.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next one now.
Yeah. So now we are moving to the next priority area, which is urban development. I'm sure all of you know, India faces an enormous challenge with regard to urbanization.
Yes.
We largely have unplanned cities, probably apart from Chandigarh to an extent. Every other city is in India is largely unplanned. We are witnessing a major population explosion. There are multiple governance issues which have propped up, from transportation to the traffic problems, the air pollution.
In fact, the World Bank also says the same thing in the report.
Yeah.
There will be a huge population growth in the urban cities.
Exactly. And also the rural-urban migration, which scaled in the 90s and early 2000s, in a way has continued even in the last 2 decades as well, as people find more opportunities in urban areas. So urban population is rising, but your city infrastructure is not improved. It is not able to handle the increased load. And this has led to several problems and challenges. So that is why the central government has given utmost priority for urban development. The budget says that the government will look at cities as growth hubs. And the focus will be on transit, connectivity. The focus will be on basic urban services to improve the quality of life, from waste management to clean water, sewage management, and ensuring that the environment in general in cities is made cleaner.
Yeah.
This is a major environmental problem. It affects the standard of living, and in many ways it affects the economy as well.
Yes.
So there are few priority initiatives the government has announced in this regard, and more importantly, there is focus on developing the peri-urban areas, or what we call as the satellite towns that exist in the outskirts. So they will be a focus, especially if you look at Bengaluru, Hyderabad. These cities have a lot of potential to expand even further, to create mini satellite towns on the outskirts and allow them to flourish as a city in itself. So there is priority for the development of peri-urban areas. There is focus on improving the infrastructure in our existing cities, focus on brownfield development projects. Instead of focusing just on the new projects, existing projects can be upgraded. Create better facilities, maybe better parks or better roads, better pavements. So that becomes a priority right now. And also for transit-oriented development, 14 large cities with a population of more than 3 million, they have been chosen for these transit-oriented development projects, where the focus will be on creating multi-modes of transport, from buses to rail, and essentially to bring down the cost of transportation as well, because urban mobility in itself is a big challenge. Plus, in urban areas, housing is a massive problem. So that issue is being addressed through Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the second edition of it, where the government is focusing on 1 crore urban poor households. Because in most cities, we are seeing the rapid expansion of slums. This creates multiple socio-economic problems of its own, from poor education to poor nutrition standards to spread of diseases. And to tackle them, housing is one of the solutions. And also, the government has been promoting street vendors. We had schemes like PM Swanidhi. So in a continuation of that, the government is organizing 100 weekly hearts. That's the plan, to organize these street food hubs. So I think this is great for food lovers as well. Or maybe they might go out and eat more junk food. But either ways, it will benefit the street vendors. Whether healthy or not, it will benefit the economy. And also, we all know how problematic it is to rent a house in our cities. Look at the rents in Mumbai, in Bengaluru. It has become unaffordable. So the government is looking to bring more transparency here with regard to rental policies. And Also, it is trying to create more affordable rental housing for the industrial workers. Especially most of them would be migrant workers. They'll all be staying in rented houses.
Yes.
So it's very crucial to make rent affordable for the migrant industrial workers. So I think these are some very good initiatives. The focus is absolutely right, focused on welfare of the urban areas. So now over to you, sir.
Agriculture sector, okay, one of the very important focus areas. Like I said, the first part of the announcements in the budget, after giving an overview, the first area of focus was agriculture sector itself. So finance minister says there is availability of digital public infrastructure. We will use the DPI to improve, let's say, certain facilities that we provide to farmers. For example, we will digitalize certain records of the farmers. We will use a DPI to promote lot of services. Second one, we want to promote agriculture research and development. In fact, yesterday also I told you, and again I'll reiterate it. According to a report that was published by iCreer, a premier research agency in India, if you spend 1 rupee on research and development in agriculture sector, research and development, mind you, the returns or the yield will be more than 11 rupee. Compared to that, you spend on fertilizer, road, power, etc., the returns or the yield is less than 1%.
Oh.
So obviously there is a huge importance to research and development. That's the reason the finance minister says, I will be introducing, that's the government will be introducing climate resilient crops.
Yeah.
We need to increase the production. We need to increase the productivity. And with whatever is happening regarding the climate change, we need to have a climate resilient
Because
crop.
with more extreme weather events,
Yes.
more droughts, heat waves,
Yes.
and forest fires, floods.
Best example, the recent El Nino impact, which had a huge impact on the overall agriculture production in India.
That too in a agricultural economy,
Yes.
primary agrarian economy like
Yes.
India. I think it's a
Right.
great
So
initiative.
one, climate resilient varieties will be introduced, and second, right, will be 1 crore farmers will be initiated into natural farming, which is good for not only the soil, good for the farmers also. Dependency on the imports will keep on coming down, etc., etc. Right. So mission to achieve self-sufficiency, very important, self-sufficiency. Why? Please understand this. India, despite being an agrarian economy, we produce a lot of pulses, we produce a lot of oilseeds.
Yeah.
But even then, we are dependent on the imports. We import a lot of pulses into India. We import a lot of, right, let's say the oilseeds into India, edible oils into India, and that increases the vulnerability. If the exporting country bans them, imposes a surcharge or let's say taxes on them, we will have to bear the brunt of it.
Or even, sir, as we saw the conflicts, like
Yes.
Russia, Ukraine are major producers of
Yes.
food grains.
Yeah.
And the war caused a disruption, which increased the food prices, caused inflation,
Yes.
food insecurity.
Right. So that's the reason the government now says we will focus on achieving self-sufficiency in pulses as well as oilseeds. Clusters for vegetable production would be developed. The whole argument is, in recent times, if you look at the inflation rate in India, one of the drivers of inflation rate has been vegetables. And that's the reason the government is now focused even on cluster-based development of vegetables.
Right.
So that the procurement can be much more efficient, the warehousing, transportation, etc. can be much more efficient, and supply, stable supply will always mean good for you as well as me in terms of market prices.
Or is the government worried about the electoral outcome? Because usually onion prices and essential vegetable prices have toppled governments.
That generally happens, sir. It's not just that the recent elections has happened that way. I distinctly remember one incident where a Delhi government, the Delhi government or the sitting chief minister lost only because of onion prices.
Exactly, yeah.
So the idea of, let's say, the vegetable prices or let's say the eatery prices having an impact on electoral outcomes is nothing new, because that has been historically been accurate. Reason being, all of us, whether you reside in urban India or rural India, all of us spend a lot of money on consuming food. But specifically when the prices of vegetables, pulses, or for that matter onion, tomato goes up,
Yeah.
they will hurt very badly the poor person.
Correct. And also, sir, pulses are a source of protein.
Protein, yes.
Yes.
So basically the rise in the market prices of this will hurt the common man much more compared to, let's say, the poor class person much more compared to a middle class or an upper class.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the reason the government is taking so many measures in order to address the food inflation in the domestic market.
Next, infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Regarding infrastructure, please understand, infrastructure investment has kept on increasing over a period of time. Nothing new in that. If you look at the announcements of the governments, let's say last 5 years, how much is the total expenditure done by the government to develop infrastructure keeps on increasing. Reason being, capital expenditure has a multiplier effect. Multiplier effect essentially means if you spend 1 rupee on infrastructure, how much my GDP will increase by. By how many rupees the GDP will increase. That is the multiplier effect. So historically, capital expenditure or the capex multiplier effect has been very high.
So in many ways, it's not an expenditure, it's an investment.
Yes.
A long-term investment.
Yes, the investment on development of infrastructure, investment to basically ensure that the demands in the future, the demands of the future such as let's say roads or warehouses, ports for that matter. For example, India wants to ensure that by 2030, we will have exports to the tune of $2 trillion. So to achieve all of it, you require infrastructure.
To make this
so capital expenditure has been increased to 11,111 crore rupees. And this is not just all of it. Please understand this. In addition to central government spending more than 11 lakh crore, central government back in the year 20 and 21, this was the prime of the pandemic. During that particular period of time, government in order to increase the capital expenditure of the states announced an initiative. A 50-year loan would be provided for capital expenditure purposes, provided they meet certain conditions, but it was interest free. That initially was 1 lakh crore, was increased, and in this year's budget, it has been further increased to 1.5 lakh crore rupees. So essentially, if you put together overall expenditure, capital expenditure, which will be done by the center, allocation to the states, etc., the overall capital expenditure will go to the tune of 15 lakh crore rupees. 15 lakh. That's not a small amount.
Yeah.
Compare it to last year, you will see there is at least around 20% jump. Around 20% jump in terms of capital expenditure.
Sir, what was the capex in the last budget as a percentage of GDP?
It was around 3.4%, sir. 3.3 to 3.4%.
It's roughly remained the same.
It has remained the same, but if you look at the overall expenditure, and mind you, all these are budget estimates. And what is provided in the previous years is generally either revised expenditures or let's say the actual expenditures. It might so happen that instead of spending 15 lakh crore rupees, we might end up spending even 16 lakh crore.
Right.
We might end up spending 17 lakh crore as such, because the actual expenditure will vary compared to what was announced by the government because of let's say requirement of the economy. It might so happen that the government will feel you need to have more capex, they might increase the allocation. So right now it is a 15 lakh crore, somewhere around 3.4% of the GDP number.
Got it.
Okay. So apart from the capital expenditure, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana was launched many decades ago. It will provide all-weather roads, at least on paper, all-weather roads to our villages. So certain villages which have been identified, over 25,000 villages which have met the criteria to be covered under GSY, the fourth stage or the fourth phase of this will be implemented and the road connectivity will be provided to these villages. AIBP already have covered. Assistance to Assam as well as the other state to manage the flood already covered by Chetan sir.
Right, sir.
Let's go to the next one, sir.
Next, this is another priority area which again I think is very noteworthy as well. This is innovation, research and development. The government has provided a lot of priority for innovation and R&D because the government plans to make India a developed country, a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And the only way you become developed is by focusing on research, development, innovation, bringing out new technology, securing more patents. That's the only way a country can really grow technologically and even capture the global market. So in this regard, India has shown a lot of improvement. Our ranking on the Global Innovation Index has improved in the last few years. Our investments in R&D also has gone up considerably. But still, if we compare, sir, with other developed industrial economies, we are still falling short with regard to our investments in R&D. For example, let's say you look at countries like China. United States. Their investment in R&D is in the range of 3 to 5% of their GDP. If you look at Japan and Israel, this jumps up even further, up to 6-7% of their GDP. Now, I'm sure you would know what's the number with India. India's overall investments in R&D is roughly around 0.6 to 0.7% maximum, around 0.64, 0.65%. So as a percentage of GDP, what we are putting or what we are investing in R&D is very minimal. But still, the number of patents from our country has gone up. Of course, our investments have slightly increased over the years, but compared to our competitors, we are way behind the curve. And the primary problem with regard to our investments in R&D is that private sector India doesn't invest much. If you look at the data,
just to have no, let's say some of the students might have this doubt.
Right, sir.
Why is the R&D so important?
This is how you bring out new innovations. Let's say we are focused on clean energy, green transition. We are focused on artificial intelligence, cyber security, and other critical emerging technologies. The only way we can capture these markets is by focusing on research and development, or be it new vaccines, new drugs, or new changes in agricultural technology. So to grow in any sector, technology is what is needed. That's why they say technology is a great leveler. It creates a level playing field between two unequal competitors. So if India really has to get that jump start and jump ahead of its competitors, investments in R&D is going to be absolutely critical. So as I was pointing out, sir, if you look at the GERD, the gross expenditure that we incur on R&D, most of it is coming from public sector. Even though our total R&D investments is very less as a percentage of GDP, within that, majority of investments is coming from the government itself. Because the government has a number of scientific institutions, R&D institutions from ISRO, DRDO, many others, CSIR. So most investments are coming from the government itself. Private investments have been historically very low, one amongst the lowest in the world. If you look at China, US, private sector investment in R&D is in the range of 75 to 77%, meaning their governments are investing hardly 23-25%. But in India, it's the opposite. The private sector is investing hardly around 35%, 36% in R&D. Remaining 65% almost is coming from the government itself. So this is one reason why India is lagging behind, and that is why the budget has some commendable initiatives. For example, the Anusandhan National Research Fund. This act was passed last year, the Anusandhan National Research Fund Act. It's modeled on the similar fund which is there in the US as well, right? So this would increase funding for R&D, research and development in basic sciences. It will encourage more researchers to get into the domain and incentivize them. Plus, private sector will be pushed. It will be incentivized by the government to pull in more funds and resources into R&D.
In fact, one of the reasons why private sector did not invest much was absence of incentives.
Absence of incentives. So the government is trying to pool around 1 lakh crore rupees, and this is supposed to give a boost for the private sector as well to put more money into R&D. So let's see how this works out. But next, what is really interesting, what caught my eye was the space economy. Sir, as you know, we have liberalized our space sector, opened up to private investors, even FDI liberalization has been done. Startups have come up and they're already making great advances in the space sector. So India, as you know, is one of the cheapest spacefaring nations in that regard. We offer some of the most low-cost launches for foreign vendors, right? And India has great potential here. So to tap into this, the government has correctly identified the sector and it has set up a VC fund. The government itself wants to become a VC investor, bringing 1,000 crores of investment. And the goal is to ensure that the space economy grows by 5 times in the next decade. So that's a very ambitious target. So I think India has great opportunities here to leverage both ISRO and the private startups which have come up, the private space companies. I think they have a long way to go. So it's a right encouragement in the right direction. So coming to financials.
Okay, the last part of the budget discussion now, financials. What has been proposed by the government in terms of, let's say, deficits? Because obviously, from 1 year to next year, if you look at the budgets, the government will spend more money compared to how much they are earning. But to ensure that there is an intergenerational parity, that is how much we spend today will not affect, let's say, the expenditures of the future governments, the FRBM says that we have to maintain fiscal deficit, drag it down. So Government of India this year has targeted a fiscal deficit target of 4.9%. In fact, please understand now, initially when the interim budget was announced, we had targeted this to 5.1%. So that's the reason in the beginning of the discussion I said this is a budget which is focused on fiscal prudence. That is, rather than spending left, right and center on those schemes, this schemes, right, XYZ, etc., government says, no, I will bring down the fiscal deficit. And to a very great extent, this number has been helped by the Reserve Bank of India's surplus transfers.
The dividends which have been
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Reserve Bank of India very recently, which was surprising to most of the people in the market, has transferred a surplus of more than 2 lakh crore rupees. 2 lakh crore rupees.
That's the dividend you should
Yes. Right. So just to put things in perspective, the overall budget size is around 42 lakh crore rupees. And the Reserve Bank of India has transferred a surplus of more than 2 lakh crore rupees. So instead of achieving 5.1%, now government has dragged it down to 4.9%. In fact, the FRBM document, within the FRBM document, the macroeconomic framework statement says this is commendable because the economy has arisen now from back-to-back 2 black swan events.
Right.
Although those have not happened purely only in India, but they had an impact on the global market, including Indian market, by the way. So we have set up a target of 4.9% of fiscal deficit for the current financial year, which the government wants to drag it down to 4.5% in the next financial year, that is for 25 and 26.
Also, if you look at the trend, sir,
Yes.
if you look at the pandemic period, the
Yeah.
government was forced to increase spending,
Yes.
even at the risk of crossing the FD
Yes.
targets, fiscal deficit
Generally,
targets.
what happens is whenever these kinds of disruptions do take place, and again, it's out of the hands of the government of India.
If you remember the 2008-2009
Yes.
financial
right,
crisis.
the crisis which not only had a huge impact on the US market, also affected us.
Right.
So back to back, multiple events either in the domestic market or in the international market will have an impact. And at that particular point of time, there is no other option for the government to go for excess spending. At the same point of time, receipt collection would be lower. That's the reason during pandemic, the fiscal deficit shot up to more than 9%. We wanted to drag it down to 3%. It shot up to more than 9%. But now Government of India is on a fiscal consolidation path. We have targeted 4.9 for the current financial year and 4.5% for the next financial year. And other targets, you can have a look at it. Do not memorize these numbers. Revenue deficit targeted is 1.8%. The primary deficit is 1.4% and effective revenue deficit 0.6%. In addition to this, if you look at what are the numbers, what are the overall numbers, right? You will basically see that the government would be spending the money in this way and earning under these particular parameters. For example, the income tax collection target is 19% of the overall. And again, please understand, nothing surprising here because generally more than 55 to 60% of the total income earned by the government comes in the form of taxes.
Right.
Tax is a major source of receipt for the government. So income tax, union excise 5%, GST 18%, corporate tax 17%. And apart from this, customs 4%. In fact, in case of customs also, lot of changes have been done for different types of products. You do not have to memorize them. Simply remember some of the important announcements, such as for some of the cancer medicines, the customs has been waived off. For gold, customs has been reduced. For silver, customs has been reduced. Even for mobile phone components. In fact, the finance minister made a remark. She stated that the mobile phone exports, production and exports has increased in India. The exports have increased by more than 100%. And that's the reason I will reduce the customs duties which are applicable on some of the components so that more production will take place and we can even export at a lower cost now.
Right, sir.
Okay. So taxes, these are the components. In addition to this, borrowings and other liabilities, more than 1/4 of it. Non-tax receipts is 9% and non-debt capital receipts is just 1%. In addition to this, please have a look at where does the government actually spend money. And as usual, the important areas of expenditure for the government will be central sector scheme, the expenditure, or let's say the transfers to the states because of the Finance Commission recommendation of fiscal devolution or the tax devolution, the share of taxes, or let's say the grants which are recommended again by the Finance Commission, centrally sponsored schemes and interest payment. Generally, interest payment takes a chunk of the total expenditure.
It's always a considerable amount.
Yes, generally around 1/5.
Yeah.
20%, 21% will vary from 1 year to next year. But again, it is on lines, 19% of the total expenditure for interest payment. So this is how government is going to earn money and spend money. Is it finalized? Will it always remain constant like this? Absolutely no. Because I hope all of you know these are estimates. The government is estimating income taxes of 19% of the total income. It might change over a period of time, right? Corporate taxes of 17%, it might be affected by many other parameters. So these are the budget estimates.
Sir, looking at subsidies here, I was just reminded, does this budget have any populist schemes? Is there any wasteful expenditure happening?
Again, I would not be calling that as a wasteful expenditure, but please understand, there is a term that was used by the Prime Minister himself.
culture.
Revdi culture. So, argument is populist schemes, welfare schemes are required. Let's be very frank with that. There is a requirement of welfare schemes. But the question is, are these schemes targeted well? Are these schemes provided in a right way, ensuring that right beneficiaries will get the benefit? For example, the finance minister in the speech talked about e-voucher system.
Right.
To the students who take a loan, 3% interest would be provided in the form of a subvention, interest subvention. But the finance minister rightly said, this assistance will be provided in the form of a e-voucher system. And the beauty of the e-voucher system is, it is person specific. Only the right person who has got this access can use it only for the right purpose.
So there is no chance of leakage.
Yes.
Diversion of funds.
Historically, if you see, imagine government wants to provide you 100 rupees and they want you to purchase food grains. But what is the guarantee that you'll be using the 100 rupee for purchasing food grains? If I'm of that particular, let's say, orientation, I would be using 100 rupees to purchase drinks.
Yeah.
Right, so there is always a potential of abuse. Again, I'm not promoting it, but there have been leakages that have happened. So government is basically talking about usage of e-voucher system. Government is talking about providing subsidies for women, right, etc., etc. So again, as far as I'm concerned, government has not changed its path. Historically, it has remained on the same path of providing required welfare schemes. And with introduction of direct benefit transfer, we have been able to cut down the wasteful expenditure or the leakages in the system. That is exactly what has been continued here as well. So in addition to this, if you have a look at the overall key numbers, focus on the budget estimates for the 2024 and 2025. These are budget estimates. The overall expenditure is 48 lakh crore rupees. 48 lakh crore rupees. But the key number out of this would be the fiscal deficit. I would focus on the fiscal deficit here. The fiscal deficit is 16 lakh crore, which essentially means government is targeting a borrowing of 16 lakh crore rupees this year. And this, if you compare it to last year, this is a revised estimate, and compare it to the actuals of the year 22-23, you will realize, at least regarding the estimates, you will realize that the government's borrowings have been controlled. Again, take it with a pinch of salt. Reason being, you do not know how much will be the government actually borrowing in the coming days.
We'll get to know only when actual estimates.
When the actual estimates will be provided 2 years after this budget, you will come to know, did the government end up borrowing only 16 lakh crore or they ended up borrowing more than 16 lakh crore.
Right, sir.
So take it with a pinch of salt, but at least right now, you can be comfortable in the fact that, or looking at the fact that, yes, government has targeted a lower borrowing compared to 2 previous financial years.
Right.
So this is basically the overall view of the budget that has been presented by the finance minister for the current financial year 24 and 25. Sir, would you want to provide concluding remarks now?
Yes, sir. Before that, I would like to ask a couple of questions.
Yes.
We were talking about welfare programs.
Yes.
One of the most important welfare program has been Manrega.
Yeah.
Since the days of the UPA, especially given the financial crisis that occurred in 2008-2009 and the slump in the economy, Manrega was one welfare scheme which put money in the hands of the rural people. Yeah. It helped in sustaining the demand.
Yeah.
But in general, we have seen a trend under the current dispensation where a consistently lower allocation has been provided, or at least that is the criticism.
Yeah.
That Manrega has been sidelined, or a lower allocation has been provided. So what do you think, sir? What is your view on this?
Sir, there are different viewpoints regarding Manrega. Please understand that. Point number one, having more allocation in the Manrega doesn't always indicate that there is a rural distress. Even this particular point was mentioned by Economic Survey. The argument is generally the argument is, if people are demanding more under Manrega, more number of days under Manrega, more people are joining Manrega, it simply means they are not able to get other jobs. Economic Survey says that's not the case. That's not the situation. So one, higher demand for Manrega doesn't always equal to higher distress.
Right,
it might have happened in certain times when, let's say, pandemic was there, when people went back, there was a reverse migration that was observed, more people in villages, no wage opportunity outside, they would have demanded more. But government itself says there is a complete economic recovery. Sufficient number of jobs are available in the market. In fact, government data itself says in the last 4 years, we have created 8 crore jobs. That is annually 2 crore jobs.
Should we take that also with a pinch of salt?
I would simply say go with the government data, right? Because ultimately, you will have to write what is the source of it. And if you write this according to EPFO, this is the data. According to RBI, this is the data. Please go with that. Even Government of India has given a same statement last week by the Labour Department. They said don't worry about the private sector data, because the way they calculate it may not be a standard. The sample size may not be appropriate. So argument is simple. Higher demand for Manrega doesn't equal to higher distress. Second, it's a fallacy saying that allocation to Manrega has been reduced. Generally, for example, last financial year also, when the budget estimates were provided, allocations were lesser. But by the time the financial year got over, again, even though we have finished the financial year now, the amount of allocations were revised upwards to 86,000 crores. So same amount of allocation has been done for the current financial year. It might be revised upwards by the end of the financial year.
Sir. And also to remember, Manrega is again seen as a wasteful scheme sometimes. There is a very valid criticism as well. That Manrega has often led to wasteful work. There are no long-term assets created. And there is even a joke that just for digging up the soil, people are getting paid. They just shift the soil from here to there and get paid for that. So in that regard, I think it has not really contributed to long-term asset creation.
There is an argument.
Yeah.
But please understand, the target of Manrega is rural population. The kind of assets which are needed in the rural part of India, that would be the focus area. Yes, there was a criticism because there was a leakage also. There was found to be a leakage regarding
fake job cards.
Yes, right. So that I'm pretty sure government has already addressed it. And with that, I don't think so there is any requirement of, let's say, criticizing the Manrega. As long as the government says it is working, write it. If at all you find a criticism, to balance the viewpoint, write the criticism as well.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. I have just one last doubt.
Yes.
I was watching some videos of other educators or institutes. Many of them were saying that budget analysis, economic survey analysis is not needed. It's pretty useless for the exam. They say because we had a recent interim budget. And again, before next year prelims, there would be one more full-fledged budget which will be submitted. So the argument is of some educators is that you don't watch these videos now, it's a waste of time, watch it later. What do you think, sir? How do you think the analysis will be helpful? Because I just want to ensure the aspirants know like what questions to anticipate. Will the discussion really help in some way or the other?
Okay. So generally understand this, when the budget is presented in a normal year, we do it in the month of February.
Right, sir.
And before the budget is presented, the economic survey is provided. One best use that you people can make of these documents is memorize a certain important data. Memorize certain important data. And you can use that data, write it in the mains examination and quote it as saying, this is from economic survey, year so-and-so. This is from the budget document, year so-and-so. So definitely yes, if you ask me, you will have to use government data to fetch very good number of marks in the mains examination. Second, because the budget has been announced so very nearer to the mains examination now, you cannot simply say the budget announcements are useless, don't read it. There have been instances in the past where the budget which was announced in the month of February, questions have been asked in the mains examination.
Right, sir.
For example, the question was mainly based on the changes in the taxation. And currently, again, the government of India has announced certain changes in the capital gains tax. Or for that matter, UPSC question setter might look at the concept of angel tax. Finally, there is a closure under the angel tax. UPSC question paper, the person who is preparing might pick up the concept of angel tax and ask a question based
In
on
fact,
that.
there are so many important concepts, schemes, which can be very important for the exam.
Yes. Right. So, I would simply say, do not ignore the budget documents as well as the economic survey documents, especially if you are writing the mains examination in the month of September 2024. So, provide.
Thank you, Shyam sir, for such a detailed analysis. So, on a concluding note, as they say, the taste lies in eating the pudding. So, the budget, this is just a plan the government has laid out. We have analyzed it. But the actual outcome we'll know only when it is implemented.
Yes.
Whether the announcements, whether the proposals will come through. So I hope you guys liked the discussion. And if you did benefit from the session, do let us know through your comments. Do let us know what you think about the budget that has been presented. And don't forget to support us with your likes. That is what keeps us motivated. And do subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Good night.